world of work. It's fine because now we get to talk about the School for Good and Evil.
Oh, we do. Welcome, listener, to Analysis Roulette. My name is Duck. I use he, they pronouns.
My name is Dia. I use they, them pronouns.
And we are absolutely talking about the School for Good and Evil. We are doing a TV tropes analysis of the School for Good and Evil. This is possibly the best day in Dia's life. That's a little harsh, but...
It's definitely demonstrative of the kinds of things that I was doing with my free time as a teenager. It's a little Dia time capsule.
Right, and it came out too late for me to have read it as a teenager.
Yeah.
It was published. When was it published? So the first book in this series was published. The first book in this series. The series is called The School for Good and Evil. The first book in this series is also called The School for Good and Evil. The school within the book is called The School for Good and Evil. You will simply have to accept the many layers of the meaning of this term. But the first book was published in 2013, which was a bit late for me to be reading stuff of this sort of demographic pitch.
To be honest, we're not in the target demographic for this, so I was 16 when this came out. I think I read it when I was maybe 17. But I, by happenstance, lived miles away from my school at that age, so quite often, rather than go home for between classes, which I think the majority of people do in sixth form, I would just loiter in the library reading anything that looked like it would take me less than half an hour.
Right, and your memory on this one must be faulty, because there's no way you read this in half an hour.
It looked like the kind of book I would read in half an hour, you know what I mean? Like
I mean,
anything
that's
that
fair,
looked
but...
like I could read in one sitting. Which,
Yeah,
from
but
memory, I did. I think I read this in between classes, so that would have been probably an hour, 2 hours.
A couple of hours, I could believe. On my ebook version, like on my phone screen, it was 400 pages.
Oh yeah, I can read that in half an hour. Easy.
Okay, you read like
Looking at the
6
length
times
of it just in a photo. Bear in mind, this was in the middle of my A-level, so I was at peak reading speed.
Fair. Also, I'm not the fastest reader I know. I'm just feeling, insecure about it.
Don't. It has done me nothing.
Oh yeah, I'm aware that this is a skill that doesn't have a real world help. Nonetheless,
it's one of those things you get praised for massively as a small child.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm insecure about it.
For no reason. Yeah.
Because I was, told it was very important when I was a small child, and now I believe that.
Yeah, but no, I read this in between lessons at school when like any of my friends who were in the school had gone home. Yeah. So I was just loitering in the library, and it's a pretty surreal experience to read this book in one sitting, just like quietly alone, aged 17, because the book is already a wild ride.
The book is a wild ride. I have to say 2 things here. One is that in terms of like prose quality and plot structure, this is only one notch above TikTok sensation Lightlark. But the other is I enjoyed it about 4 times more.
Oh yeah, it's a very enjoyable read. I would say, honestly, genuinely, I think this is a good book. Like, I think I can give that as a recommendation for like a middle grade novel about a fantasy school without like people thinking I'm saying it's the next Infinite Jest.
Right, I will say some of the prose is a bit iffy, mainly in choice of verbs.
This is fair. There are some weird choices, but like...
Yeah. On a paragraph level, it's all fine. On an individual sentence level, somebody told this author that they shouldn't overuse the word said, and they have used so many alternatives to that.
I mean,
many of which are not words for speaking.
That problem is absolutely endemic in YA and middle grade publishing, though. Oh my god.
Right.
I think Twilight was the
it's fun.
Patient Zero.
They also appear to believe that a clump is a kind of shoe. This is never explained, which is why I think they just think it's obvious. They just think that's what clump means, is it's a kind of shoe. And they definitely don't just mean Agatha's feet. Because there's one point where they describe her feet and then shoving her feet into her clumps. So they just think it's a word for shoe. Listener, it is not a word for shoe.
Maybe it is somewhere. Maybe it is somewhere.
I'm searching this right now.
I'm just imagining that it's just a regional term neither of us has ever heard of. But yeah, if you have like an 11, 12-year-old sort of niece maybe who likes weird fantasy novels, this is the kind of thing that I would say, yeah, go ahead, give it to them. They'll have fun.
Honestly, give it to your nephew as well.
Yeah.
If you have a of any gender, they will probably enjoy this book. They will not learn any terribly bad lessons from this book. They will probably enjoy the gunging. I enjoyed the
We did not
gunging.
get into the sequel. They will get some lessons from the sequel. I don't know if they're good, but they are lessons.
I don't know if they're going to get good lessons from the first one. I'm just saying they're not going to learn anything bad. I think it might be a net zero knowledge situation.
Oh yeah, I think first book is net zero knowledge. Second book, you're definitely acquiring knowledge, but in the service of what, I'm not sure.
Uh-huh. So
Gender roles are
briefly,
fake and exist only to confuse gremlins, mirror reflections, sprites, mystical
I mean,
beings.
that's a philosophy I can get behind.
Yeah. I think I have read the second one. I don't remember the story. I think we should also flag up that we are also talking about the film, which came out
Yes,
in,
we
I believe,
watched.
2022.
Yeah, it's a Netflix original. Netflix originals means it's incredibly glossy and has high production value by brand.
Except for a couple of random specific costumes.
Well, the costumes are gorgeous in a very specific way, where the costumes are gorgeous, but you can see where the corners have been cut, but nonetheless they've done a really good job with the budget they had.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This movie knew what it had and used it to its absolute maximum potential, but that does leave us with some very alarming corset choices.
Okay, that one specific costume, they do appear to have spent their last $4.50 on it in a Halloween shop. Yes,
Why? That's the thing that bothers me is it's the one dodgy looking costume, and they've used it in all the promos.
right,
And
and
every
just
time I look at it, I just think, did you run out of material? Like, Sophia, you own a vintage store. Did you not steal any of your costumes from Beetlejuice?
and even without that, just there are some gorgeous costumes in this film. I am never going to get
Oh,
over
beautiful.
like satin embroidery, femme Greco-Roman armor
Oh
as
my
an
god.
outfit. It's
I
gorgeous.
know.
She's got bracers. She's got like the big circular pins that hold the cloak on, but they're embroidery.
The climax really is the peak of costume in this movie.
Honestly, tiny Greco-Roman butch and like big femme is now the thing.
So yeah, the movie is beautiful. They don't follow exactly the same plot, but
I think they improve it,
let's
frankly.
not get into. There are bits I don't like, but in general, I think it's a more cohesive unit.
Yes, I think specifically when I say they improved the plot of the book would stand up to it, except that the last chapters of the book are extremely hurried in terms of plot. So it's hard to follow what's going on because things that should have a couple of, in my view, should have a full, couple of scenes to let you understand what is happening here, get dealt with in a paragraph.
Mm.
It felt to me like the book ran out of time and had to fit the whole plot into the last 10 minutes,
Yeah,
which is not a problem the film has. The film gives you at least time to follow what's happening.
yeah. I think the book is much better at setup than finish up,
Yes.
and also much better at setup than the movie, which bafflingly decides to just remove all of the world building.
It does. It does. But the movie's last half hour is some of the best fun you can have without leaving home.
It is terrifically good fun. And also, I will say, I think I probably read more middle grade novels than you do.
I think that's probably true.
None of the problems in this book are problems specific to this book. Like,
I think that's also probably true. Yes.
yeah, most of the issues I would flag as funny in this book, including like slightly weird pacing, strange verb choices, absolute pathological inability to use the word said. These are all middle grade novel problems rather than School for Good and Evil problems. I'm not saying
Yeah.
all middle grade novels do these things, but they are definitely frequent offenders.
Yeah, I'd buy that. Should we discuss the plot? I feel like we should at least summarize the plot for the rare listener who has not read this book or seen this movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, as we all know, this was a hit success of the late 2010s and everybody read it.
Oh yeah, we're really preaching to the choir when we talk about this at all, but we should, just for the completeness' sake, we should probably
So
summarize.
The School for Good and Evil is a sort of fairy tale fantasy, I'm going to go with. It's
Yeah.
set initially in the woods beyond Gavaldon, which is where our main characters, Sophie and Agatha, are from. And what we know of the people of these woods, the village, is that I don't even remember how often. Is it 10?
Possibly?
Every set number of
Every
years,
certain number of years. I feel like the
two
number of years
children.
doesn't line up with the length of the school career, which is
No.
a choice.
Every set number of years, two children are kidnapped from this village into sort of the distance. And it's one child who is sort of universally agreed to be beautiful and good and kind, a fairy tale princess type, and one who is ugly and unpleasant and generally disliked. And those people, or someone who looks very like them, begins to appear in fairy tales in the books which are mystically delivered, I believe, to the village bookshop.
And they're all fairy tales. It is unclear if there's any other reason material in Gavaldon.
Very unclear, actually. In the movie, we know that there are ghost stories because Agatha likes them. But yes. We are introduced to this through Sophie, who has been waiting her entire life to be kidnapped, which is a great opening line.
It is. I did read the first line and I was like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this. This is good.
It's a good indicator of the kind of story you're in for. So Sophie is stunningly pretty and also deliberately stunningly pretty. She's very into her beauty regimes and her hair and her making her clothes. And she tries to do one good deed each day because she wants to be kidnapped and become a fairy tale princess. Because what the people of the village have come to believe is that the children who are kidnapped are taken to some kind of school where they are taught to be fairy tale heroes and villains. One of Sophie's good deeds, to this end, was befriending the local outcast and local outcast witch's daughter, Agatha, who is goth and doesn't like people. And therefore clearly evil.
It's evil. That's what evil is. It's when you're an emo teenager and you don't like your peers and they don't like you.
Yeah.
When you are neuroatypical and weird.
Yeah. To be fair, in this sort of vaguely fantasy medieval fairy tale Renaissance timeline, I totally believe that just being a bit goth is considered like deeply horrifying, but it is very funny to read.
It is good.
She is genuinely deeply weird. She carries like dead animals that her cat brought her around in her skirt and things like that. But also, you know, she hasn't really done anything. She's just a bit weird.
She's a bit weird and spooky.
Yeah, she's a bit weird and spooky. So am I. You know, we all have our sins. So eventually, despite Sophie's father barricading her in her room because he's convinced that she's going to get kidnapped, Agatha and Sophie are indeed swooped up and wished away to the school for good and evil.
But each of them breaks out of their rooms. Yeah.
Yeah. Except that they are not dropped in the schools they were expecting. Sophie lands at the school for evil, and Agatha lands at the school for good.
They are both horrified.
The main difference in how the movie sets this up is in the movie, the kidnappings are not a regular thing that people know about. They are told about it one day before it happens by the village bookstore owner.
Right.
Because they get a second-hand book which was printed by the school.
The film cuts out the civic religion of this village is keeping your children away from the school for good and evil. And that's such a loss because that's just such an amazing bit of world building.
It's the funniest thing about the entire book. I love it so much. That, like, in this world, people are, like, trying to make their kids shittier and uglier so that they won't be kidnapped.
I think they like, do normalization to the mean makeovers on kidnapping night. It's the best thing.
It's just very funny. It's every 4 years. I just looked it up on Wikipedia.
Okay, I think that does actually line up with the theoretical, like...
I think it's, 3 years at school, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be 3 years at school, but maybe
There are
it
3
lies
books.
fallow for a year.
According
to
makes
Tropes,
sense.
there are 7 books.
There is a second trilogy, is what's unnecessarily confusing there.
Ah, right. And a prequel and
so there's
trilogy, which has an excellent pair of names.
Yes, so there is a trilogy of which I have read the first 2 books, which is set at the School for Good and Evil. There's like a companion book, which is very trendy for middle grade novels and has been ever since Percy Jackson did it. I think they existed before that, they just weren't as popular. And then there's the Camelot trilogy, which I have not read any of, which are sort of set, you know, when they're all adults off doing their adult lives. And then I think there's now a prequel series, which is ongoing.
Good for them. I mean,
so we're at the school.
I appreciate that for an author.
Yeah. So we are at the school. Kids have been swapped, as far as they're concerned. Neither of them is happy with this situation. Sophie is not happy because the School for Evil is horrible in every way. It is designed to make people evil. It drops them in guns. The other students are all, evil and hate her because she's a pretty princess type, which they are supposed to be killing and eating. Agatha, because the students at the School for Good are the most annoying people on the planet.
Yeah, that's true. I can't defend them. They're awful.
Awful.
Awful rich kids. She has been dropped in a school full of fashionable rich kids, and they're doing gender at her.
They are doing gender at her, and she just wants to have her goth little life and be left alone. So in the book, it's much more of a school story. We see Sophie trying to fail and excelling. We see Agatha flat out failing, but discovering that she is good at sort of the superpowers only good people can have. They solve a little riddle because they want to be sent home. Well, Agatha wants to be sent home. Sophie wants to go to the School for Good, but, second best. But he says, if you want to prove you're in the wrong schools, you can solve this riddle. They solve the riddle. The answer is True Love's Kiss, because this is fairy tale land. And so they figure that Sophie is the one with the best chance of getting True Love's Kiss, because Sophie is hot. And so Agatha starts trying to set Sophie up with Tedros, the son of King Arthur, who is the most popular boy in the school, and therefore the best shot at true love. And they have little school adventures.
It's not even like the best shot at getting a boy to kiss you and really mean it. It's like Sophie is like, well, I looked at him when I first saw him and I just knew he was meant for me. So he's the one with whom the love will be true enough.
Sophie is deeply horny and I respect that.
That is a truth about Sophie. Yeah.
I love her so much. Eventually they have a variety of schooly adventures, especially with the teachers. And they figure out that the Storian, the magic pen, is atoning in some way for the schoolmaster, who is secretly evil, having murdered the good schoolmaster.
Right, there was a pair of twins, and one of them was good, one was evil, and one of them murdered the other, and that threw the world out of balance.
Yes, which is why the good students are all basically just vain, bitchy teenagers, and the evil students are just sort of there, not really doing anything evil, and not very successful at all. Everything's out of balance. Sophie finds true love with the schoolmaster, but then sacrifices herself very, very quickly. But true love between two evil people, because Sophie is getting real good at being evil, basically means that he has the powers to end the world. He becomes very, very powerful, etc., etc.
Well, at least in the film, he gets this power and he immediately does this.
Yeah, I think in the book, it's more just like he can do things.
Actually, I think in the book it also just
I need my one true love.
It just happens. It just
happens. Yeah, I think so. But in both the book and the film, the schoolmaster tries to kill Agatha, and Sophie sacrifices herself for her, which is an act of true love, and brings the ghost of the good twin back, who saves everyone's lives. But Agatha then kisses Sophie, and it's a kiss of true love, which brings Sophie back from the dead, and they just go back home. Just, I guess, leaving everyone with a lot of explanations to make.
They explain nothing, they fix nothing, they just go home.
They cease to destroy things and go home, which, to be fair, is probably the best they could do.
Really all you can ask of.
The movie, as stated, does tidy this up a bit by spending a lot less time on school stuff and a lot more time on why the immortal evil schoolmaster's true love is a teenage girl. Because that's creepy.
It is a bit weird.
And also on Sophie and Agatha's relationship, so it's much more sort of cohesive, and also it gives us much more action. The sequence of plot events is very similar, apart from the actual school shenanigans, but we get a lot more of the epic battle and the clever switcheroo and all of these things. The clever switcheroo being how Sophie had gained the advantage over good to begin with. Essentially, one of the rules of the universe is that evil attacks, good reacts, which is very funny to me because I've exclusively heard that about supervillains previously. So Sophie goads the good students into attacking the evil students while they're having a party, which switches good and evil around and means that evil, previously evil, now good, now has the advantage. So they can just flat out massacre them. They don't literally massacre them. You know what I mean?
They
It's
can
like
have some
bowling. They're
really
doing
cool action shots, which they were previously not allowed to have.
yes, and the climax of the movie looks great. They're all in fancy outfits. They're doing cool magic attacks. It's so fun.
They are having the best time. They're wearing the best outfits they get the whole film, and doing the cool action shots which they've previously been denied, and they get to win, or at least to have the upper hand for a while. And they're having such a good time, and so are we.
Yeah, it's great. And yeah, the climax itself with the schoolmaster is very similar, except in the film it has actually been set up in advance a lot better. So it does feel a bit more like a climax of this movie, rather than a climax of a prequel novel we haven't read yet. I haven't gone into all of the details, but that's sort of the overarching plot. I'm sure we'll get to some specific details a bit later on. Do you want to walk us through what TV Tropes is?
Yeah, so TV Tropes is a famous website, which is already a warning sign. But TV Tropes is a famous website that's been around for really quite a while at this point.
Yeah.
It is. See, now I'm wondering when it was founded, and I'm getting distracted.
It was originally Buffy. It was a Buffy fan site, right? So it has to be, what, early 2000s?
That sounds right. They're about
I think
pages
it
and
overlapped with Sabrina because the alphabet trope used to be called the Libby after the one from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and there's not a huge overlap period.
Oh, here we are. It was founded in 2004.
That is later than I would have guessed, but does track.
Yeah. So it's been around for 20 years nearly. And it is essentially a media analysis site, but for one very specific mode of analysis, which is the identification of tropes that are shared between stories in their various forms. It is often quite shallow,
Yeah.
sort of by design.
There are sections of it which are used for more sort of debate and interpretation, but sort of in its main form, it is simply a list of things that are present in a work.
Yes. Yeah. And that list of things has gotten very long over the years. Sometimes you'll read something in the list and you'll go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. I recognize that as a trope, as a meme, if you like. It's as a structural or story element that I've seen in other places." And sometimes you'll look at it and go, "Is that enough of a thing that we need a word for it? Or what does that even mean?"
Yeah. Like,
But
unique advantages to viewing media through the Lego blocks that they are made up of. But I do also think there are certain types of internet brainworms that just make people go completely weird about the existence of tropes.
yes, it's in many ways, to me, TV Tropes feels of a piece with this sort of witty one-liner school of writing,
Mm.
which is this feeling that, as you say, Lego blocks. Anything you write, anything you read, can be broken down to just reusable parts, and it's just about how you plug them together. And you can do a trope, or you can subvert or reverse a trope, but it's all still basic. It's sort of an idea that there's nothing new or imaginative about anything. And if you can break it down to its elements, that's all you need to do. But it can also just be a fun way of saying, look just how many books have got a one ring you have to destroy to end the story.
Yeah, I think one of
So
the
many.
things about TV tropes is it has sort of two approaches, which is one, which is the trope page, which contains a list of all of the works which have used that trope, and two, the work page, which has a list of all of the tropes that are in that work. And I think in some ways you can use those two sides very differently.
Yes. I personally find a trope page much more interesting because I think, okay, take the we've got the idea of there's a magical MacGuffin, itself a trope name for the plot item, the item that determines the plot and his powers itself in some way, such as the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, and it must be destroyed to save the world, end the plot, whatever it is, rescue the girl, whatever of the things we're doing. I find it more interesting to say, well, we've got this trope, we've got this story element. How many things have used it and in how many different ways, and how have they turned it on its head, and how haven't they? I find that personally more interesting than the works pages that just says, here's the things, some of the things that happen in this book in a alphabetical way. Alphabetical is the worst possible way in which to organize a list of story beats. I'm sorry, but it is.
I am a big fan of the works pages because one of the things I like seeing what things people will think are common tropes just on the basis that the trope is common and vaguely the same shape. Like, you will
Yes.
see things like the hair of gold, heart of gold trope, which is a trope where a blonde character is really good and their blondness is supposed to signify that. Used to describe, like, real life celebrities who come off as affable in interviews.
Oh, gross.
I am genuinely fascinated by the stuff like that. And it does happen with fictional things too. I don't know. Anti-villain used to describe, like, a villain who is polite. And you're like, no, that's just
It's just a villain who's polite.
that's just that's a trope that's been doing that a while. It's not like, ooh, maybe he's a good guy. It's like, no, he has manners.
Right, he can still, like, yeah, that's
But yeah, I find it really fascinating to see what building blocks people project onto works that I don't personally agree are there. And like, I've just given two really egregious examples, but obviously there are much more subtle ones where I go, oh, you can see it as that, I guess. I don't, but I get where you're coming from. And I find those really fun to read because they're very fascinating to me. And that's, I think, double, triply true of works where the audience is a lot younger than me. So the people editing the TV tropes page are, for the most part, a lot younger than me. And quite often are encountering story beats for the first time that, to me, are extremely old hat.
yes. Yes. This does strike me as a work that could be like one of your first encounters with the idea of world building more complex than this single book. Because it's very clear, even from this first book, which is the one we read, that there's more going on.
Yeah,
There are unanswered questions, and they're quite big questions. Like, where is the real world then?
exactly. It's like I had I think the best example of this I've ever seen is I once saw someone in all earnestness praising the TV show Supernatural for the devil,
A
which with all
truly
kindness,
never been done before.
which with all kindness meant it's not a character flaw not to have read much Christian literature. Like, congratulations on not having read much Christian literature, but that is the opinion of someone who has not previously encountered much Christian media.
Right. It's if you think that's an innovative thing, you are, as you say, non-pejoratively ignorant of the source material that Supernatural is drawing on.
Yeah, and like, congratulations, you've made it through this much of life without ever having accidentally encountered Paradise Lost. More power to you.
Right, but that is what's going on there, is that you are not familiar with Paradise Lost or any of its wider impacts on how we tell stories about devils.
Or my personal introduction to it, the Waywalkers series, which no one has ever heard of.
I
Email
haven't
me
ever
if you
heard of that.
have.
Is it on the list of hats?
It isn't, but it is going in there eventually. It's another deeply weird middle grade series because I'm just obsessed with really weird topics, and that we're very scared of writing weird things in novels for adults.
That's true. We feel we have to be sensible and have a, boring things like a real plot and making sense. We
It's
feel like
not
the
even
world
that.
we
I
put
think
in the story has to be consistent or at least it has to cohere. We're
it has
worried
to
about things
cohere.
like this is just existing in the world of story and don't worry about the supply lines. In adult books, we feel like we have to worry about the supply lines.
Yeah, like, if you want to have a deeply weird idea in a book for adults, I'm not saying every single author is going to be forced at gunpoint to make it thematically resonant or, like, plot relevant, but I do feel like there is pressure in books for adults to cohere and plot and theme in a way that there simply isn't in a lot of middle grade and indeed YA to an extent novels, which is just, there's a lot more freedom to go, I had this crazy idea and I think the kids are going to love it. And here
Yeah.
is a 3-book deal.
In young adult fiction, you can have a dragon that must be fed a herd of cows every week. And no one is going to ask, except in a sort of jokey way after the fact on TV tropes, where do all the cows come from?
Yeah.
It could just be, that's how this works. Whereas in adult
But
fiction,
yeah.
you kind of have to at least have a nod towards explaining where the cows come from.
At least if you don't, the fact that this dragon exists has to be the point of something.
Right. It just can't.
I
You
think
can't have the dragon hangs out over there, eats cows every week. Meanwhile, we're having the story over here.
there's a
The dragon is not super relevant. Which I would read that
yeah,
book.
there's a lot more grace in middle grade publishing for stuff that just is, and that's the kind of stuff that I personally find really fun and interesting because I like to see what authors do when they have stuff that just is. Like, what made you want to write this? I have so many questions about the author of The School for Good and Evil because I want to know what story he wanted to write.
Right.
And yeah, so for me, one of the like really nice things about TV tropes as a way of viewing literature is it gives you an insight into what other people think they are consuming when they consume the same story as you.
Yes. I can definitely see that. And there is one on the film page that we're going to have to talk about that being incorrect, just wrong, just not true. We'll get there.
Yeah, there are a couple that I do look at and go, well, I don't quite see where you got there, but there you seem to be.
Right. Well, in this case,
So,
it's a case of, well, I think you've misread this book or misread this film. My theory is to talk through some of the tropes that I think are in there.
good.
And then we'll maybe touch on some of the stuff that other people think is in there, and the one big red flashing sign that I just fully disagree with because I need to have a little rant about it.
That's fair. I do think we should preface that if you have edited the TV tropes pages for this work at any point, we are not coming for you. It's fine.
But also, too, please email us. We will have you on for a guest episode. I would love that.
It would be so fun. Absolutely do that. Especially
Okay.
if you've read more of the books than we have. Because I
Right.
have opinions about the second one, but we didn't have time to read 2 books.
We are people with day jobs, and sometimes our art has to suffer. For instance, sometimes we only read the first book in the series instead of all six.
Same, because I do think you would have enjoyed the second one. It got
I hear
gender
that I
in it.
am allowed to read things for fun on my own time,
I recommend it.
which I might do because they are quite quick. Like, I didn't get through it in half an hour, but they're not long books.
Yeah, they're not long books. They are at a rip-roaring pace.
They do move
And
fast. You're never bored. There's not time to be bored.
the buck wild exit.
Doesn't take
All
long.
right, on we go.
Okay, so starting from not alphabetical, because I haven't. Well, one, because I have not tried to make the comprehensive list that you really require in order to then alphabetize the list. But also,
That's
too,
fair.
because I don't have a good way of doing analysis. I want to start with like the biggest and most glowingly obvious one, which is that good is beautiful and evil is ugly,
On purpose.
as a rule of the universe, and on purpose, and as a consequence of doing these things. Good people try to be beautiful, and doing good makes you beautiful, and being beautiful is evidence that you're good. Evil
Except when you
people.
are Sophie.
Well, except when you are Sophie, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Similarly, evil is ugly. Evil people are ugly, and ugly people are evil, and evil people make themselves ugly, and doing evil makes you ugly. Again, except for Sophie,
Yeah.
except that not at all, except for Sophie. Other analysts on the TV tropes pages have suggested that this is subverted by Sophie. It's more of a bait and switch. That's a trope situation. Sophie and Agatha at the start of the book appear to be a contradiction to this because Sophie is beautiful and Agatha is not, and they're put in the wrong schools. And one of the reasons you're supposed to know they're in the wrong schools is that they don't visually fit in, except that I don't think this really counts as subverting. I think this is more of a bait and switch, which is itself a trope. Because the more it's intentionally there to mislead you to start with as a reader or as a viewer into agreeing that they must be in the wrong schools. But in fact, the more Agatha accepts her place in good and tries to do good and becomes powerful and good, the prettier she gets, and the prettier she gets, the more powerfully good supernatural she becomes, and the converse for Sophie. Sophie really takes off in terms of being able to both manipulate people and do evil magics when she embraces being evil and ugly as a unit.
Yeah. And what I do think is What I do think is interesting, actually, is one that this is not a visual medium.
No, it's a
Like,
book.
it's noticeable that this is a book that is telling us about the attractiveness of these children
Constantly. Every page.
constantly because it's plot relevant, which is very weird. But also, one of the things that's actually quite interesting to me is that Agatha and her love interest Tedros are sort of the only characters in Good who we are given reason to believe are not actively trying to look beautiful. And Sophie is the only evil character who we are shown trying to appear beautiful, and she then goes on to teach that to other characters, to teach the other evil kids to be beautiful. And I do think there is something there. It's sort of the shape of a subversion, but it falls through because it needs the good guys to look good at the end of the day. It needs the main characters to be attractive.
Yes, I think that probably is, especially for the film, but also for the book. The book is actually quite committed to good is beautiful and evil is ugly, and you become these things if you follow them, and you become these things as a way of proving that you are trying to follow them.
Mm.
It's a betrayal of at least your team and possibly your innermost self if you are in the school for evil to wear pink.
Yeah. And this is
Which
impressed upon
is a
Sophie
bold
quite
statement.
traumatically, leading to murder, which I
Yes.
love.
The first time
It's one
someone
of my favorite
really,
scenes.
really significantly, on a more than temporary basis, damages her beauty, she straight up murders him. Sophie did nothing wrong.
I adore Sophie.
All, evil torturer, traumatic haircut wolves should be kicked into streams where they can drown. That's just what you should do. If somebody, this is the official position of this podcast. If somebody ties you to a chair and non-consensually cuts your hair off with an axe after threatening to torture you, you're allowed to kick them in the stream.
I just love how little thought she gives it. She's like, no thoughts, impulse, murder, no regrets.
Sophie has done every single thing she has ever thought of doing. There is not a single thing she's ever considered doing that she hasn't done.
Absolutely. I love her so much.
She is a great character.
It is becoming a running theme on this podcast. I'm just like, absolutely, go icon. You do you, Sophie. Don't let anyone tell you different.
Murder that wolf.
Go off, queen. Murder that wolf. She's so real for that. But yes, I love Sophie. But yeah, I do think there is the shape of something. I think, and this is already getting into the intricacies of the system that is TV tropes. It's interesting. I think my honest opinion is that this both subverts and plays straight to the good is beautiful, evil is ugly trope, because ultimately all of the main characters have to be hot, and also ultimately it's fairy tale world and you have to keep the idea of evil is ugly. So both of those things kind of have to be true for the entire
Yes.
series.
Yes, I think it is
And they
partly
just
because
can't be.
It's fairy tale world, not just in the story being told, but as a matter of world building, it's fairy tale world.
Like, Sophie reinvents evil and gives everybody sexy makeovers. That's a plot beat. But also,
But then it drops. And they revert to being like
drops.
normal, regular evil, and then she becomes more effective when she just embraces the ugly evil.
And then she becomes good and becomes beautiful again. It's neither subversion nor played straight, but yo-yoed.
You can argue that about the main characters, Sophie in particular, but the
the
world
background
itself,
is 100% trope.
right? The world building itself, the world, the setting itself, embodies it as a law of the universe, and we know this because in the climax, where kids of the School for Good are baited into attacking the School for Evil, this is the like speaking things into existence moment excuse that Sophie needs to say, well, you just attacked us. Attacking is the province of evil and defending is the realm of good. So since you just attacked us, you must be evil. Their clothes turn black, their hair falls out, their backs hunch, they become ugly, by which we know they have become the officially evil team. And conversely, evil must be good, and all of the officially evil kids become beautified, as well as their outfits and thus we know that they have, by the law of the universe, become the good team. It's really
Which
built
I
in here.
love. It's so one of the things that's really notable about that to me, and they stood out to me in the movie, not particularly in the book, is that it isn't actually the act of attacking that does it. It's recognizing what they have done. It's when Sophie says to them, "That's evil," is when they turn into in the movie, they're not like scary, ugly fairy tale monsters. They're just goth.
In
But
the
when
movie,
they
they just
turn
have
goth
different
and
accents.
they are just wearing dark clothes and are like slightly messy, and the previously evil kids are just in like pretty ball gowns now. But the switch happens when the universe is informed about it. It's like a Looney Tunes character realizing that there's no flaw.
Looking down, yes. The
Sophie is like,
action.
excuse me, universe, I think
Actually, I
you
think you
will
hit on it.
find.
Because that's also what's going on with Sophie. What makes you ugly is not being evil. What makes you ugly is self-recognition as evil.
Which tracks for Sophie, because as mentioned, Sophie has never thought about a thing she has done in her entire life.
Never once.
I don't think Sophie has had more than 5 thoughts.
Which is itself, we talked about this a little bit before, but when you are framed taking action as evil and defending against that action or resist, or being the rules about attack and defend kind of broaden to be evil is active and good is passive, and then we have our officially evil and officially good main characters, one of whom has done literally everything she has ever thought of doing. There is no step of think about the thing before she decides to do the thing. She sees a situation, she has an impulse, she performs an action. This is Sophie. And then against her, we have Agatha, who spends so long thinking about what she's going to do that most of the time she doesn't do anything.
Agatha has a freezing problem. It's really noticeable in the film.
It's very noticeable in the film because the film has 2 different scenes where somebody is fighting for their life. There's a sword on the ground. Agatha is staring at all of this in horror. Right, the same somebody, the same sword. She's staring in horror. It hasn't occurred to her she should do anything. What's she gonna? And this goes on. It takes her like a good couple of minutes, and someone else throwing the sword to her.
In the first of these instances, she kind of goes, "Sophie, I can't grab the sword. You have to grab the sword." And Sophie goes, "Absolutely the fuck not. I'm not putting myself in danger." And Agatha goes, "Oh, fine," and grabs the sword. In the second instance, Sophie, who is currently bleeding to death on the floor, has to throw her the sword for her to do something.
Psychically throw her a sword before she realizes that the presence of the sword or the presence of the problem are something she's supposed to act on. To be fair, she does catch it in the most awesome twirly way and immediately go into menacing mode. Like, as soon as the sword is thrown at her, she's like, right, yes, I'm supposed to be saving the day. And she does. But she has a freezing problem, and it makes a nice contrast to has never considered one step in advance of what she's doing, Sophie.
It's interesting because the setup we get for Sophie is very much like this calculated, like, I am going to do everything. I am going to do a good deed every day. I am going to do my hair and makeup routines perfectly. I'm going to very carefully, deliberately curate myself as the sort of person that gets kidnapped to go to the school for good and evil. And then as soon as there's a wrench in that plan, she is just like, that's it. Impulse only. Done thinking. Didn't work.
Right. Although even in the beginning when she's working on this deep plot, she does not have a good control of what comes out of her mouth.
Oh no, she's not good at it, but she's at least trying to think thoughts. And I do not get the impression that she is trying to think thoughts for the rest of the book.
Well, she's achieved the plan. She's got here. Now we're on plan 2, make it up as we go along. And we are not planning it.
To be fair, her entire plan is to get a teenage boy who does not know any girls to fall in love with her, which I don't know if you remember teenage boys. Like, in the movie, she literally just walks past him.
Right, but wearing clothes.
She walks past him in a short skirt, and he goes, "Wow, what's that?" He doesn't say that, he just looks at her, but, in overacted movie way. And you're like, oh, okay, so this is the plan. You're just going to stand in his vicinity whilst being kind of attractive.
This will produce true love. Yes.
Which, to be fair, doesn't work, but you do understand why a couple of teenage girls would think that was the way to attract a man.
I believe that has been tried since time immemorial. The I will walk near them, wearing my pretty clothes. This has been used, to be clear, in all directions, because walking up and down so the girls can watch you has also, for many boys, been the method of courting.
And of course, this all culminates with the time-honored tradition of I will get him to mentor me in a sport, which is sexy, aka archery,
To be fair,
with torso pressing.
there's a lot of torso pressing,
yeah.
there's a lot of touching hands, putting faces close together.
It is a very sexy sport.
The worst shooting style you've ever, like, he's supposedly guiding her through how to do this. And the one, not the one thing, but something that makes me really buy it, as both of them are being thoroughly distracted by the flirting attempt, is that he's supposedly correcting her grip and her stance and things. Post correction, it is still very poor. Her elbow is in the wrong place.
Her shoulders are like level with her chin.
Her shoulders level with her chin. Her elbow is like down by her side. The bow is only half drawn. It's bad. It's bad.
But Tedros's attention is on her. So
Tedros'
who's
attention
the
is
real
on
winner?
her. There is some cheek to cheek, like, here's how you look down an arrow coaching. Everyone's having a good time, and Agatha, the world's most dedicated wingman, is magicking the arrows into the target because, which is great, archery is something you can only do if you are pure at heart.
Yeah, there's a lot of world building that really feels extraneous in ways I adore. I will also say, as tropes go, Love Triangle covers a lot of tropes. I have no idea if there is one which covers what is going on in the movie, because in the book you sort of at least vaguely get a sense that Agatha is low-key falling for Tedros. You can see where a love triangle comes from. In the movie, Agatha is sick of everybody. Tedros especially. She wants nothing to do with any of these people.
Right. In the book, she does get eventually, she does get on board with the maybe my true love could be Tedros train. In the movie,
She's sort of
it
on
has
board with it.
never occurred to her that this goblin could be her problem.
Yeah, like in the movie, like Sophie gets one look at Tedros and is like, I'm interested. Sophie is horny on main, and I respect that. Tedros is looking for a woman who is pure of heart. So he thinks Sophie's pure of heart and is into that for a bit, and then he thinks, oh, Agatha is pure of heart and he's into that. Agatha is just not interested. She is done. She cannot believe that this man is talking to her when she has shit to do.
The only person she's interested in is Sophie.
She just wants to go home with Sophie, and this man is just here.
That is the vibe. Because that's also the happy ending they get, is that they go home with each other, having had true love's kiss, and he watches them do this and stays out of the way. Well, it's the climax is great. I love how Tedros is only on screen.
She does kiss him before.
Useful.
She kisses him before she and Sophie go back to the real world. And Sophie is like, you can stay here. Tedros is your one true love. And Agatha kisses Tedros and then goes back to the real world with Sophie after all. And there's just a brief shot of Tedros looking at them like, wait, what?
He has no idea what's going on.
He looks so confused.
He also, bless him, politely stays out of the way while they're having a moment while Sophie is dying in Agatha's arms. And you have to respect someone who can stay out of the way while you are having a tragic romantic moment.
And then when Sophie comes back to life, he rushes over like, oh, I could probably help here.
Honestly, Agatha coded. Until he has thrown the princess, he does not know what he should do with the princess.
Yeah. I do like Tedros, both in the film and the book. In the book,
I like him a lot better in the film.
In the book, he comes across as just kind of a dumb teenage boy who will probably work things out in time and make him any more likable. Whereas in the film, I genuinely like him.
It doesn't hurt that he doesn't look or behave like a teenager in the film. He's just not a plausible teenager.
Like, Sophia Anne Caruso can kind of pass for a teenager. The actress who plays Sophie, no one else can.
No, everyone appears to be a grown up, which is fine. Like, you don't have to be casting teenagers in this sort of thing. I am perfectly willing to believe in the university for good and evil. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. The actresses who play the main two probably look the youngest, and they both look like at youngest 2021.
Yeah.
The actress who plays Sophie could maybe kind of pass for a teenager, and I feel like that's honestly a good call, because you are meant to be extremely skeeved out by Rafal, the evil schoolmaster dude. talking about how they are in love and, flat out snogging her. Like, it is a full-on makeout. It's not a little, like, Disney true love's peck on the lips. They are about to shag on that table.
She's into it though.
She is extremely into it because Sophie is, as mentioned, extremely horny at all times.
Right, I don't because she has just she is into him enough that it officially counts as true love's kiss. But also she's been having a
It is
very
very much
weird few
passing
days.
interests kiss.
Right, I feel she reconsiders extremely quickly for someone who was in true love. 30 seconds later, she's like, "I'm changing my mind here."
I also love that the thing that breaks her out of it is realizing that they're not compatible in that they don't both want to be evil overlords. He wants to destroy the world, and she wants to be queen of it. And if he destroys the world, there's no one for her to be queen of.
It's like, this is the pinnacle. This is the remaking of the world into an evil paradise. And she's like, "No, there are no minions here. Where are my worshippers? This is not heaven.
I must have worshippers.
If I do not have henchmen, what is the point? I require a posse."
If there are not conquered people for me to be queen of, then this is not my dream. And if it is not our shared dream, this is not true love. Therefore, I'm going to sacrifice myself for Agatha because I do love her.
Right. She really figures things out very quickly, although, again, she doesn't figure anything out, she acts. But the impulse she has is save Agatha, which is a good impulse. Agatha, meanwhile, should we talk about Agatha for a bit?
Agatha's
Should
great.
we talk about Agatha's specific trope of, like, she was pretty all along?
Oh, God. Yeah, I think that it actually says beautiful all along in the text of the book, like word for word.
Yeah, Agatha gets a makeover, and she's been beautiful all along, and then she gets dressed up in the full ball gown and the hair and the makeup to go to prom, and everyone is so wowed by how pretty she is.
In the book, this is goth phobia in action. In the movie, this just comes across as like violently transphobic.
Right. Yes. So in the book, she doesn't want to wear the pink, and she doesn't want to do the makeup, and she doesn't want because she wants to be emo and goth, and she's valid. We support that.
Extremely real to any like tweens reading it who are solidly in that phase. Like, I respect this representation.
Crucially, a book doesn't have to have an actually very pretty actress performing that role.
Mm.
So when the book says Agatha is unattractive and has buck teeth and whatever, I don't remember exactly what it says. She's ugly, but when it
I think
talks
she
about
just has greasy hair and like dead mice in her skirt, which, to be fair, is a good start on not being attractive to people.
most people not into the mouse skirt thing. Yeah. There are
I say that
exceptions
like
to
I
every
don't have at
rule.
least one dead rabbit in this house.
Well, who doesn't? Yeah, in a book, when you say this character is unattractive, the reader can believe you, which makes this goth being forcibly made over into a pretty princess and not being into it.
I think
In
even
the
if you
film,
assume she was beautiful all along, it's a lot easier for you as a reader to be like, oh yeah, people don't like how goths look. That's a thing that makes sense to me in this fairy tale world where good people always wear pink or lilac.
exactly. Whereas in the film, you have a very pretty actress who is wearing a costume when she first arrives at the school for evil that is,
Cool for good.
it's absolutely fine. There's nothing seriously wrong with it. It's a little loose fitting and a little butch, but only hand-me-down trousers. Like, it's not even
Her hair
committed.
is slightly frizzy in her arrival, like before she has her
Yeah,
makeover, and she is wearing not spectacularly well-fitting masculine clothes.
right. But not in a way that comes across as I am dressing as a boy. In a way that comes across as I am wearing hand-me-downs and they happen to be my brothers.
Yeah. There is no man for her to have had these handed down from, but that's not important. What's important is that she has the vibe.
That's the vibe it is. Which means that when she lands and everyone immediately reacts to her in utter horror at her appearance and calls her names about it, and talks about, is it a demon? And then she gets force femmed. It is the most trans thing that has ever happened on a screen.
Literally, like, she has, like, again, slightly frizzy hair and slightly ill-fitting, vaguely masculine clothing. And the pretty princess girls in their like Disney princess silken gowns
Immediately pick up on there is something wrong with her, which big trans mood.
it is the biggest trans mood. Just the other girls just mystically know somehow that there is something elementally wrong with her. Even though she has had her hair fully curly girled in what seems to be like 10 minutes, which I know some people who would like that secret, um, and been put in a taffeta ball gown. She looks exactly like all of the other girls. The only difference is that she's not happy.
Yeah, and for the rest of the film, that is the only difference in appearance between Agatha and the rest of the girls, is she is not enjoying this.
Yeah, like, she's not even scowling, she just looks like mildly irritated.
A lot of the time in the film, she has the same look on her face that I would wear, which is the I can't quite believe that this thing is happening and I don't like it.
Yeah, I was sat next to you watching this film, and that is what you looked like.
Right, I was making the same face. I was like, the shocked, semi-disgusted, weirded out thing that you do when faced with unfamiliar gender performances.
Yeah, it's, me at a hen do. I'm happy to be included, I guess, but this is a ritual that I'm not sure I'm supposed to be part of.
Right, it's the face I used to make when people tried to hand me babies. I was like, I don't know what you want me to do with this, but I do know that you're handing me it because you are making some very wrong assumptions about who I am as a person. And I would like to give you back the baby, please. I don't want to hold your baby. I'm sure it's a lovely baby. I don't see what that has to do with me. That's Agatha's face. It's extremely trans because
It's
that
so
whole
trans.
she is being violently excluded and put down and hated purely based on giving off the wrong pheromones.
Like, there is no visual indicator that she is anything other than mildly bored, and yet everyone who sets eyes on her can tell immediately that she is not like the other girls. And the thing is, I think it is supposed to be, like, it's very transparently supposed to be a not like the other girls scenario, where it's just like, oh, normal girls, they're so vapid with their hair and their makeup and their boys
Right,
and
but
their
because they
taffeta
didn't
ball
let her
gowns.
actually resist the ball gowns.
Yeah, she doesn't really.
She just looks like the rest of them. Because the impression you get from Agatha, at least, is that she's reluctantly wearing the uniform, but is otherwise full goth. And Agatha is in the film is just fully fitting in,
Yeah,
doing everything right, wearing the shoes.
like, there is a throwaway line from the dean of the school for good that, oh, it seems like you don't like pink much, don't worry, we have other shades of pink. But, like, she doesn't object to pink. She's just like, yeah, sure, makeover, whatever.
She's just like, what? Why do I need a dress?
Fine, I guess. I mean, I didn't bring any spare clothes, so I guess this is what's happening now.
Yeah. Why are we? The objection is more to how much time are we wasting on the dresses here than it is to the dress.
Yeah.
Although some of her dresses are very ugly.
There are some really poor dress choices, which, to be fair, I totally buy are made by a teenage girl who has been given no instructions other than pick a dress. She just grabbed one at random, and it happened to be hideous. And made of
Yes,
grandma's curtains.
I think that is entirely plausible. Because then, of the many lessons they have not yet got to personal style and how to express
They
it.
have gotten to, I will say, both of us are in agreement that the smiling classes are a gem, just because the smiling instructor, as played by Michelle Yeoh, is one of the greatest performances of our time.
She's in 2 scenes, and she really makes that first scene pay off in the second one.
I don't know what they paid for, like, a cumulative 30 seconds of Michelle Yeoh, but
It was
it
worth
wasn't enough.
it.
She deserved an Oscar.
We could have even stood additional Michelle Yeoh scenes. They would have been great. Yeah, she's the smiling instructor. She spends her first scene teaching the girls to smile and being dismayed that Agatha cannot perform a proper princess smile, and then she returns in a second scene to explain to us that she does not give a shit about smiling.
She used to be the teacher of magical history,
And they
but
made her
because of convoluted evil plan reasons, the school for good has been turned into a beauty regime, and she is now the smiling instructor, and she is gritting her teeth and getting on with it.
She hates it so much.
This also raises several questions about, like, are you trying to get tenure? Like, why have you not quit your
Why
job?
are you doing this? Why are you here?
And like the impression I got is that like Good also does not understand why their team is winning, but they are reluctant to change a winning formula.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. Is that they don't understand why they keep winning, but it's whatever. They're like, this seems like it shouldn't be working because it's vapid nonsense. But we keep winning, so it must be working. So I guess we teach vapid nonsense.
He hates it.
She hates it so much, and I
Oh my
love her.
God. I think I mentioned actually not in our Shazam review, but when talking to you about Shazam, that the sequel to Shazam, which I actually saw after recording that episode, has a very similar trio of older actors having the absolute time of their lives, while the younger actors do surprisingly good jobs at acting. This has a very similar vibe of the school mistresses, the school masters, the teachers, etc. all just seem to be vibing.
They have fairly small jobs to do in a fairly lightweight film, and they are having a good time with it.
They are just here for little outfits and little adventures. Meanwhile, the kid actors are like actually acting their little socks off.
They are. Most of them are doing a great job, to be fair.
Yeah. Oh yeah, genuinely very good performances from like some young actors. I already mentioned that Sophia Anne Caruso, who plays Sophie, was in Beetlejuice, which is one of the reasons this movie was on my radar. I'd actually completely forgotten about the books when I realized this was coming out, but it's one of her first big film roles, and she is incredible. Sophia Wiley, who plays Agatha, is also fantastic in this. Most of the kids are great. But they are on a very different plane of existence to the adult cast, apart from, as mentioned, Michelle Yeoh, who is also acting her socks off, just from a very different direction.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Hugh Grant in the D&D film.
Yes.
That same kind of, he is having the best time. He is making a movie that seems to be a pretty decent movie. He's working with some pretty fun co-workers, but also he is just hamming it up as an extremely camp, like old queen. Well, not old, but you know, middle-aged slut is just the role he's been waiting his entire life for. And middle-aged, venal, self-centered sort of villain, but only because he is uncommitted to anything except profit. He's having the best time in that role. He's flirting with everyone. None of them are reciprocating. He's having a great time.
I just think you enjoy movies more when you at least get the impression that the people making the movie are having a great time.
Yes, I think this is a place where I think we both differ from the. I don't have a good pithy way to describe the school. I think neither of us subscribe to the school analysis or film watching that says we want to be fully immersed. We want to feel like we're watching something that's really happening. We want to feel like we don't subscribe to the school of analysis that says a film should be like riding the back of a drone that is watching real events. Like, we don't want the actor to be invisible behind the character in the way that I think there is a way of reading film that says this is about as much realism as possible and as little giving away that this is actually a film as possible. I think we're both in the school that says, no, turn the lights on, give us the musical interlude, and let us observe that the actor is enjoying making this film and telling us this story.
I'm not anti like extremely realistic, extremely over the shoulder filmmaking.
I'm not against it, but I think it's an arts technique rather than something a movie should.
Yeah, it's a specific style. I do not think that is the style this movie would have been well served
Not
by.
trying to do that. It has not done that. We are having too much fun to be doing that.
It's like I said when we introduced the books. These books and this movie are very much doing what they set out to do. Like, I don't think they failed in any way in terms of the product they intended to make.
No, they knew their budget, they knew their goal, and they really followed through. Like I do like think you can. There are places where you can see where they were cutting the budget.
The stimps, the like giant bone birds, are so well used. It's really impressive.
There's a fairly extended, well, not moderately extended. There's a flying sequence near the start of the film where both girls are being carried in the claws of this giant skeletal bird. And there are, every time we are getting a serious reaction shot from the girls, we have these lingering shots of them in these almost unmoving giant bird claws, and we can't see the rest of the bird. And you can tell, just if you know anything about how much CGI costs, that it's a lot cheaper to have the girls held in these still claws than it is to animate the entire bird. So the more frames you can spend on the claws instead of the bird, the less this costs you, which means the longer you can make this overall sequence. They made good choices there. You know, they saved where they could so that they could have the big shots of the very nicely done skeletal bird. I don't think it's a bad thing that you can see where they made that budgetary trade-off.
Yeah. I don't object to a movie where you can see the stitches.
Right, the costumes are carefully made and frilled and fripperied to death, but also some of them are made of polyester satin, and that's fine.
Those are mostly the ones in the background, and I thank them for making that decision.
Because sometimes you do have a choice between, I can make this costume look okay from 60 feet away, or I can make it out of the real velvet and have it look terrible from 60 feet away because I couldn't buy enough of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the right decision to make. We are still not impressed by the corset. That one maybe got missed.
I think if you have to make a cheap corset, I mean, one, don't make it the one you put in all your promotional materials. But also, two, do a really good job of making it fit, and people will be less upset by the cheapness of the fabric. But if you give her strange little bat ear boobs, people will really notice.
I think honestly, yeah, make it fit, and maybe don't make it out of PVC because PVC looks cheap. Like maybe make it out of cotton velvet, which costs £6 a meter, but looks pretty much like real velvet because it's black.
Yeah.
And also maybe don't ask the actress to bring in an old Halloween costume morning of shooting because you realised you forgot the costume, which may be
Yeah.
what happened. We don't know this, but it seems plausible because it really doesn't fit.
The actress in question has her own vintage store, and I just like to imagine her frantically riffling through stock looking for a corset on the day.
Right? She's at the corset shelf. She's like, I have got 2 in my size.
This is actually left over from the filming of the blood rave scene in Blade.
Right, I have these 2 corsets. These are the ones that fit for a definite given value of fit. They're the ones that go on and don't fall off.
Yeah.
Pick which one you would like. These are the corsets you have to choose from.
I guess we're going with the pointy bat boobs.
If there's one thing that we can all agree on, it's that corsets are always in short supply.
Yeah. It's a tragedy.
It is very sad.
We have discussed like one trope.
Yes. I'm going to rattle through some real quick.
Bet.
Things you will see in other works, which you will see here. This is a magic school. That's a trope.
It is. It's two magic
Everyone's got
schools.
dead parents. All young adult characters
I do
have
think
that.
it's very funny that Tedros is the child of divorce.
It is. Tedros is basically all his personal issues also stem from his mother running off with Lancelot, which is very funny.
I really want to read this series' take on Arthurian mythology, because Tedros is very specifically like, I'm not saying this is a dunk on Someone Shinani, I didn't look into his life at all, but Tedros is so specifically like a American millennial child of divorce.
Right.
Like, just vibes-wise, he had a boomer parent who ran off with a secretary.
I have also not looked into the author's biography. I cannot rule this out. It's possible.
The only things I know about him are that he's from Florida, that he is gay, which really does not tell me that much about his parents.
He is in the book extremely gay because there's a whole bit about how he's never noticed a girl. Which, given another scene from his perspective where he very much notices one of the boys, for no really good reason, he just notices a boy, but he's never noticed a girl, I'm just like, this is because you are gay. You'll figure this out eventually.
I think we were going to get onto this later, but since it's come up, my conspiracy theory about some of the weirder choices given the things we learn in future books in the series, my conspiracy theory is that Someone Shinani is completely incapable of writing straight people and accidentally turns them all into gay people.
Right, just by accident. It's not that he's trying to write a gay Tedros, it's just that that's what he wrote.
It's just that everything he writes comes out gay no matter what he does.
An understandable problem.
I mean, relatable, honestly.
Right. The default character is a confused bisexual. Not confused about the bisexuality, just everything else.
Yeah.
Okay. Additional rapid fire tropes. The whole concept of a balance between good and evil.
Actually, one of my favorite tropes because you have to think a lot about who is making these decisions.
It's a cannibal ways because there's always a who says and why do they have to be in balance and why can't good win is always an interesting set of questions whenever
It feels like the kind of answer you get when you ask your parents about politics when you're 7.
right. And you're like, "Have the good government all the time," and they're like, "Well, politics requires a balance between the good government and the bad government. They have to take turns."
Yeah, like it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense as an explanation to be given.
It has the shape of something that makes sense. Just all
And
the
yet you
detail.
think about it and it does not.
Right. True love's kiss. I have written love's kiss brackets girl.
True Love's Kiss also brackets Evil Kiss, which is one of my favourite elements of the entire story, honestly, is that there is a difference between True Love's Kiss and True Love's Kiss brackets Evil.
There are two true love's kisses in Chris Successful, and I yes, I have not seen enough. I would like to see more stories with True Love's Kiss brackets evil. I
I
think
just
it's a
love, I mean, aside from anything else, True Love's Kiss non-evil is soft and tender and gay and very gentle and loving. And True Love's Kiss brackets evil is a grown-ass man and a teenage girl straight up about to shag on the carpet.
True Love's Kiss brackets evil much sexier, or at least is what we're saying.
Really sexual. I personally do not find this sexy. I find this like mildly uncomfortable.
No, I don't mean sexier like attractive. I mean sexier as in more sexual.
Yeah, it is a horny,
This is a
horny True
horny
Love.
kiss.
It is True Love's Kiss brackets evil brackets horny brackets unsettling age gap.
Brackets problematic.
Really, in this book, there is evil and there is good, and then there is also problematic, and it is only problematic that really needs to be defeated. In many ways, it's like Tumblr.
I mean that tracks with evil just being like goth and spooky, and the problem is not the goth and spooky. We just need to learn to get along with the goth and spooky, but we can all team up to defeat the problematic.
Hang on. When was this book released? 2013. That was peak hipster Tumblr versus fandom Tumblr.
The level to which the schools of good, the school of good and the school of evil are also, to borrow an American term, the school of prep and the school of goth, and
Oh my god.
they are enemies since time immemorial, and never the twain shall meet. To the point they are having a different prom. They're having separate proms so they can do nice waltzing at the preppy prom and spooky disco dancing, which looks a lot more fun at the goth prom.
The spooky disco dancing at Goth Prom does look extremely fun. They are just flailing their little arms around, gathering those cobwebs.
Right. If given a choice between these parties, I would like to go to goth prom.
I do definitely think Goth Prom more accurately resembles my sixth form disco.
It does. Yes, it's a much more plausible. This is how 16 and 17-year-olds are courting in their evil outfits.
They are simply vibing.
They're having a great time.
Honestly, in terms of actual morality, the only difference in the movie is that when the good kids discover that their teachers have been turned into dolls, they go, oh, we must avenge them, which they were already going to do anyway, but at least now they have an excuse.
To kill the witch!
The evil kids have not even noticed that they have no adult supervision.
Which is just because they can be trusted. They're like, yeah, we're allowed to do this on our own, why wouldn't we? And the good kids are like, where are the teachers? Something is wrong.
I have been
left
unsupervised
alone.
for 12 entire seconds. Clearly the world is ending. It's very American.
We are dancing, touching each other, and nobody is chaperoning. There must be a
Again,
plot.
much like TV Tropes itself, this story is in many ways deeply, deeply American.
It is a product of its time and place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Florida.
But there is True Love's Kiss brackets evil, and there's True Love's Kiss brackets girl. So you have True Love's Kiss evil, which ends the world, and then Sophie is like, but minions, I must have my worshippers, and unends the world by sacrificing herself for Agatha, getting stabbed to death in the process. Agatha then defeats the bad guy. Then Sophie gets to die in Agatha's arms. It's all very touching. It is romantic, which we'll talk about why that's weird in a second. But then she dies in Agatha's arms, and then Agatha's like, "But I love you," and gives her the little soft peck of good true love's kiss. And then she comes back to life.
Do you want to know something interesting about this book?
I would love to know something interesting about this book, and so would the reader.
This book
The
was
listener.
released. This book was released several months before the film Frozen.
Huh. There was something about true love brackets sister in the air.
Yeah,
Because we will find out in one of the future books. It's not in the first book and it's not in the film, but it is apparently canon of the universe that Sophie and Agatha are sisters. So
yeah,
it's not romantic. It is retroactively not a lesbian subtext. It is in fact sisters all along.
yeah. But it is very lesbian for something that is actually sisters.
I don't think the film is agreeing with the books on this front. I think the film is leaning into this is true love kiss brackets romantic, not brackets sister. Like, I
Yeah.
just don't think the story the film has told us is brackets sister.
The film does not give sister.
No.
It is not giving me Frozen, to be honest.
It's not very Frozen, apart from in the shape of
But yeah,
you got the
just
blonde one and the brown haired one, I suppose, but not.
much as there is Ants and there is Bug's Life, there is Frozen and there is School for Good and Evil. School for Good and Evil came out in let me double check, May 2013. Frozen came out in, I believe, November of 2013.
And they are pitched to different audiences, but also, yeah, that central trio is not balanced the same way at all. Although I would enjoy the crossover, I think, of the girls from Frozen being sent to the School for Good and Evil. I think that would be fun.
Go forth, write your fanfiction.
I don't think it would be that much fun. Writing it takes so much longer than reading it.
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
a big
you know
fan of I'm a big fan of a sort of quirk on the fairy tale story, and I think it's interesting how we go through phases as a society of being interested in specific types of adaptation and subversion of fairy tales.
Yeah.
Like, there was a brief period where it was all steampunk, there was a brief period where it was all she don't need no man. There's been brief periods of elusive gay, and apparently there was a brief period of sisterly love is true love.
Which is interesting. And I'm sure there are more examples out there, which we won't go searching for right now, but that will be an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, because that is what TV Tropes is going, hey, this thing is in both of these.
Yeah. What else is it in? Where else is the dying in your arms followed by true love's kiss bringing you back to life? Well, it's in the second or third Mummy movie,
It is.
which otherwise has very little to do with this, but that thing, that structural story beat is pretty much identical.
The third Mummy movie was so bad.
The first one was so good, though.
The first and second ones are two of the best movies ever made, in my opinion. And then the third one just went, what if none of that happened?
Which is always sad in a film.
You know all of those things that were good? What if we didn't do them? Which is the worst kind of sequel.
The kind of sequel that just takes the first thing and writes allegedly at the end.
Oh, tropes.
Tropes. There is a trope form called an XP, which is where you've got a thing. Thing A appears in the work under a thin disguise as Thing B.
Sure.
There's an XP London Underground, and it's the best thing. It's like magic flowering vine monorail inside a pumpkin.
Yeah.
Well, I think the pumpkin is the station, but the implication is everyone gets shrunken down, and they're on these different light, and they're on this vast underground system of light rail hung from vines. Every line has its own color. It crisscrosses this huge space, but also every line has its own live music. It is not plot relevant. I was just delighted to encounter an XP London Underground in this book.
I mentioned that I love a fairy tale adaptation. I mentioned that I love a really just deeply weird setting. This gives me a lot, you know?
Yeah. There's so much in the flower. We only see it once. It never comes back up. I thought it was going to come back up and be plot relevant as a well, I'm in the woods and I need to escape the dangers. I shall go into the flower ground. But nope, none of them ever even consider that.
No,
It never
the
comes up
author
again.
is just very much taking you by the hand and saying, you know what would be neat?
Right, we're just going to have a little interlude of riding the fairy tale London Underground, and I appreciate that gift.
Just quick pause. We're just gonna do something that's cool, and then we'll go back to you.
I'm going to do one more trope that I noticed, and then I want to disagree with someone else fervently.
Let's do
So
it.
the one more that I noticed is this. This probably has an official name on TV Tropes. I did not go and find it. I have written it down as lust at first sight,
Yeah, that
which
tracks.
is like love at first sight, but for horny. And it's Sophie with everyone.
Except Hort.
Except Hort, who is lust at first sight for her.
Yes.
Hort sees Sophie having just been dropped in a lake of slime, hair slicked down by the gunge, rising like a squid from the waters, and says, I need that girl.
Hort is relatable.
He just wants her to like him. He's a little puppy dog. He's a little bit stalkery, but also he's just a little puppy dog and they're at a boarding school. You really can't avoid someone at a boarding school.
I do think it's kind of cute that he is quite genuine about this, because at the very end we get a little joke, like one-off, where one of the good students who has just been brought back from the dead, along with everyone else, sort of shyly indicates she might condescend to be interested in Hort, and he says, actually, sorry, I'm exclusively into Sophie, which is so cute.
He sleeps in frog patterned pajamas that his dad made for him.
Very sweet. I love the evil kids. The evil, like, students are so fun as a little background cast.
They are so much nicer than the good ones, because on both sides you're supposed to be looking at this contrast between official evil is actually sort of nice and official good is actually just sort of cruel and heartless. But it means that the evil kids are much more fun to hang out with as a reader.
They are. Especially, I have made it clear to you that I have a soft spot for Hester, who is the daughter of the hag from Hansel and Gretel, because most of the kids at both schools are the children of famous people from fairy tales, or Arthurian legend, as the case may be, or Peter Pan, also as the case may be. Hester is the daughter of the hag from Hansel and Gretel, and she is just a vibe. She has spitting fire and also conjuring fire demon powers, and she dresses mostly as a feral swamp creature, a chaotic clown, or when she gets the good girl makeover, in a gigantic taffeta ball gown. I love her so much. Truly, those are, like, my gender presentation goals.
Shapeless swamp creature, weird clown, giant ball gown. I can support all of these.
I love Hester so much. Honestly, the evil students in general are performing genders.
Oh my gosh, there's one that's not in the book.
In much the same way that the children at the School for Good are performing gender singular, one of the aspects of evil in this apparently is gender envy. Oh my god.
Right. There's a child in the film who doesn't get a name. I say child, the actor's probably mid-20s. They've not got a name in the film, and they're credited with just the name of the actress, who is a singer from Europe. But yeah, the very stylish, complete bald, flip-flopping gender presentation, I'm into it. I would like to look like that. I do not look like that.
I also love that, like, while they are now in sort of formal wear, which is quite hard to not gender in, when they are turned good, TM, they continue to present genders.
Yes. Yes. They have got extremely gendered. Even Sophie, who is officially evil, her post polarity flip ball finery is extremely gender, because this is the amazing, like, satin Greek armor.
Grecian tunic.
It's amazing. It's so gendered.
And Agatha is in the froofiest gown, and also the first gown that she looks even, like, not actively pissed off at having to wear.
Yes.
Partly just because she has other priorities right now.
Right, but she looks like she at least got to pick the style rather than just the colour on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can put that in our tropes bucket because you will see that in so many works of fiction in all media, which is that, gender is evil. Not correct gender, just, gender non-conformity is a sign of and an inducement to evil, which is why we're all in the evil school.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear the
I'm
trope that
fine
I
with that.
found on the TV Tropes official page for this work and fully and violently disagreed with?
Absolutely.
So in the TV Tropes page specifically it's in the film that I'm looking at, it was listed Cassandra truth, as in the truth that nobody believes.
Oh yeah, I saw your face when you read this.
Yeah, so reading from the Cassandra Tropes page itself, the trope name comes from the seer Cassandra from classical mythology. Apollo cursed Cassandra so her prophecies were always true, but never believed. So Cassandra therefore became a metaphor for someone who vainly tries to warn others of impending disaster but is never believed or simply ignored. Cassandra truth, Sophie tries to tell the headmistress that she's supposed to be in the good school, and she is quickly dismissed as a liar because it's an evil school. This is just a failure to read the text. This is not Sophie telling a truth that is not being believed. This is Sophie being wrong. She is incorrect.
She's not really called a liar, she's just not believed because she is incorrect.
Right, it is literally just, you, small child, have misunderstood the situation. Well, medium-sized child, have misunderstood the situation. You are wrong. You have not been put in the wrong school by mistake. Please go to your dormitory and start fitting in. This is not a Cassandra truth. And to believe that this is an example of the character speaking a truth, something that they understand that the adults won't believe, suggests that someone is experiencing the text in a way I had not considered.
Yes, to me, because you have mentioned this to me previously, and the thought it sparked for me is, the interesting thing about that reading is it's kind of true, but backwards. Because, yeah, if Sophie had been dropped in the good school, she probably would have fit in fine and learned to perform good, and nothing about the world would have changed, but then there wouldn't have been a story.
Yes. Yes. If they had been dropped in the other schools, they both would have gotten along just fine, probably passed most of their classes. The world would not have been good because it's not a good world to exist in, but they would have fit in and the plot wouldn't have happened. But it's very interesting to me to read, sorry, this is on the film page, so to watch that whole film and to come away with the answer, Sophie was right all along.
Mm.
That she should have been in a good school.
It's interesting because one of the complaints I saw from fans of the books about the movie was that the movie is really kind on Sophie because in the books, most of the most unpleasant elements of Sophie are the things she thinks.
We're just not in her head. We don't see her thinking, I'm going to be nice to Agatha because this is my good deed and is how I will get myself kidnapped for the school. We just see her being nice to Agatha, and more successfully
And
than Book Sophie. Book Sophie is bringing her the worst scones in the world. Film Sophie is just hanging out and having a giggle.
And also their chemistry in the movie makes it very clear that they are genuine friends. And we are shown that Agatha is the one who approached Sophie to be friends when Sophie was at a low point, and Sophie appreciates her for that. It's a straight up friendship, and they have adorable chemistry.
They do. Yeah, and they're just friends. Whereas in the book, Sophie comes off a lot worse even to start with, because we can see what she's thinking, and what she's thinking is not very nice.
Yes.
But yeah, I found that very much, well, I fully disagree, and also I can't see how you got there. Did we watch the same film, but because we
I
are
think
clearly
the thing is,
understanding the plot very differently in an interesting way.
my interpretation of what this anonymous person on the internet is saying, so, take it as you will, is I think the people who had that complaint about this movie were right. The people who said, this movie is way too nice to Sophie, it makes her come across as, an okay person instead of straight up evil.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's interesting to me is, we both watched the movie already familiar with the book. And I think it is possible to watch the movie and think that Sophie is right. I think you could watch this movie and think that Sophie only began to say and think and do evil things because she was put through a very traumatic experience and groomed.
Yeah.
I don't think that interpretation is in any way contradicted by the text of the movie. The idea that Sophie could have just gone to the school for good and been fine. And that it was the pressure of the situation, the belief that she had been betrayed, the active manipulation by adults that caused her to, quote unquote, become evil. And I think in some ways the film's thesis statement is something Agatha says, that people aren't good or evil, they're just people, which is a very boring moral, but okay. Which is decidedly not the belief of the books.
No, the world of the books denies this as a possibility. Your soul is good or evil, and the more good or more evil it is, the better, because it means you're better at stories. Which is itself an interesting take on what a story is.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've said everything I usefully can about this, which is not to say I couldn't say more, but we have been going for 2 hours.
Can I very quickly throw at you? I know we mentioned this previously, but we mentioned that the second book exists and is gender.
Yeah, right. I've not read it, but yes.
Can I introduce you to you
I know what you told me about it.
my favorite, like, dialogue, I guess, from my favorite excerpt on the TV Tropes page for the books,
Please do.
because it is just very interesting. So it's for the second book, and so just a bit of context. In the second book, the School for Good and Evil is still there. Agatha and Sophie are there again, and they have been put. It's no longer separated into good and evil. It is separated into boys and girls. So they are on the girls' side.
Which again, really telling us a lot about how this world is built. We have opposites. They exist in tension. Doesn't matter what they
Yes.
are.
That is the point of the world in some ways. And so Agatha, for plot reasons, is trying to get to the boys' side of the school.
Mm-hmm.
And to do so, there's basically a sort of giant magic mirror in between the two sides that is acting as a guardian.
Yes, this is in the first book as well, and she slips past it several times by persuading it that she's currently engaged in evil acts, and it lets her through.
Yes, so this is something that's happened in the first book. I probably should have established that. But obviously, it's in the first book, it's very clear that good and evil are things that one can transgress.
Yes.
The thing that's interesting to me is she has to do this to cross to the boy side of the school with the same magic barrier, and we get the following dialogue. "Try all you want, you won't trick me again," her reflection said. "You're obviously a girl." "What makes a girl?" Agatha asked. "All the things a boy is not." Agatha frowned. "And what makes a boy?" "All the things a girl is not." "But you still haven't told me what a boy or girl is." And that is under the phrase circular reasoning.
It is.
Further down the page, we get a different section, which has some dialogue that follows that, which is, "I said let me pass. Trial you won't trick me again." Her reflection said, "You're obviously a girl." Blah, 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 bit we saw earlier. "I know that someone who wishes for a boy must be a girl," her reflection said confidently. "And why's that?" "Because girls wish for boys and boys wish for girls, and you wished for a boy, so that makes you a girl. Now back to your castle, or, well, what would that make someone who kissed a girl?" "Kissed a girl," her reflection said, suddenly wary. "Kissed a girl's life, like all the best princes." Agatha glowered. Her reflection glowered back. "Definitely a boy." Agatha's lips curled. "Exactly." Her image gasped, deceived once again, and vanished into thin air. And that section is under loophole abuse. And there is something deeply fascinating to me that amidst dialogue, as we go from claim that is clearly nonsensical to claim that is sort of technically breaking the very heteronormative rules of the universe, we move from circular logic, which is blaming the reflection, to loophole abuse, which is blaming Agatha.
Right. Which also means that if you can persuade the magic that a thing is true, the magic then enforces it as a true fact of the universe, that at the point that Agatha has persuaded the mirror of this, she is a boy. Magically speaking. On some fundamental level of reality, it's a true fact about her.
Yeah, like, the reflection doesn't just go, "Oh, well, guess I've been defeated," and step away. It vanishes because Agatha has won. She has convinced the rules of the universe that she is a boy because she kisses girls.
Kisses them all the way to life.
But the thing that is TV tropes about this is that is not one trope, that is two tropes.
Yes.
And that fascinated me because both of those things are true, I guess. It is very circular reasoning to say that boys are boy things and
Not
girls
girls
are
and
girl
girls are not
things.
boys. Yep.
But also, and it is also, I guess, technically a loophole that Agatha is exploiting, that kissing girls is a boy thing.
But only if you
Within this
consider
universe.
heteronormativity to be a loophole.
A rule that could be abused.
Gay behaviour is a loophole.
Gay behaviour is really just cheating, if you think about it.
I mean, that is why we do it, and yes, it does mean we're winning. If you feel that you are being, if you feel you're missing out because all the gay people are cheating their way into happiness, come and join us on the cheating side. I promise it's more fun.
I think what is being demonstrated here, and something that I do think is a message that many 12-year-old girls need, is you can simply be a boy.
Right. Part or full-time, it's all good. But you can simply just...
You can hang out on this side of the school. We're very happy to have you.
We have podcasts. This is also a trope, which is known as Come to the Dark Side. We have cookies.
Yes. Come to the magically defined boy side of the school. We have podcasting.
Should we draw a line under this for now? Because I'm sure we will, on or off mic, I'm sure we will end up discussing this book again.
Absolutely. Okay. I think it's my turn to roll some die.
It is, but first we have to decide whether we're putting this back in the hat.
Yes. Are you putting this back in the hat?
What section is it in on our list of that? I
Let
ask
me-
because it depends. That determines what kind of thing I would replace it with, so that kind of affects whether I have a better idea.
It is in the terrible but compelling section, in between a self-help book and a true crime podcast. I do think terrible is a very unfair label for some of these, but I don't know how else to. I don't know if unhinged but compelling is the same thing. I don't think these books or films are bad. I really don't think they're bad. I think they're very good. I just think they're wild.
Yes, I don't have... I had a possible young adult book to put in a slot, but it definitely doesn't qualify as on the terrible but compelling side, just a helps to form my brain side.
Mood.
So, and I feel like you would love to put this back in the hat.
Hey, it's going back in the hat.
All right, we will discuss this again when the dice compel us.
The dice.
The power of dice compels you.
Okay, I am going to roll myself a number between 1 and 12.
Roll that dice.
11. Post-colonial.
Ooh.
Exciting.
This could be interesting.
And a number between 1 and 101. Okay. 61, which is Our Flag Means Death. Oh, that's going to be
that's
fun.
Right for it. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be exciting.
I have not watched
You'll
it.
have fun.
I'm not that I've been avoiding it. I just, have seen GIFs on Tumblr, which I need to understand a piece of media, but I will also watch it, or at least some of it.
Yeah. I'll ask you to just watch the first series just to make life easier on us both.
Mm-hmm. That's
going to be really fun. Oh, I'm really excited for this. I don't have
everything I know about it says that this is a good choice of tools for it.
I'm going into this with no questions about how I'm going to make an analysis, which is the first time in a while that's happened. I think I landed in a good section of the
high numbers are fun, but they can be quite difficult to actually do.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, listener. We will see you next time.
At which point we will have all watched season 1 of Our Flag Means Death and be ready to talk about pirates.
Yar.
Okay.
See you then, listener.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to Analysis Roulette, a podcast applying a randomly selected mode of analysis to a randomly selected creative work, just to see what happens. Your hosts have been Dia and Duck. You can find us on Spotify or on YouTube, and if you'd like to get in touch, you can send us an email at analysisroulette@gmail.com. And remember, if you like our show, share it with your friends, and if you don't like our show, share it with your enemies. Thanks.